What's up, everybody? Hey, listen, on this episode we convert the super underpowered 2G alternator to a 3G alternator on my 86 Mustang Fox body. So let's get to it. Okay, so as everybody knows, the alternators on these Mustangs are super underpowered. They pump out like 65 amps at full speed. They're just super inadequate, especially if you start putting any kind of electrical devices on your Mustang. So this video is going to be more of a how-to. I don't do a lot of pure how-tos, but this is going to be a how-to on any Fox body Mustang convert your little 2G alternator to a 3G alternator. So first off, let me show you guys real quick before we get straight to the how-to. There has been some changes on the car. I know if you're following these series, you know that this is a build project and I've got lots of things going on in this car right now. So just real quick, I'm going to show you guys what I have done over the last few days before we get started on this. So we are making some really good progress. I am confident by the end of this little Christmas break that I'm on that we'll be firing up the motor, so you guys have a lot coming. We should hear this thing roar pretty soon. I want to show you guys, last video we did tackle the drive shaft and we tackled the cross member and the transmission. One other thing I tackled last night with a lot of cuss words was training fluid. So I did drain all of the training fluid and ended up putting in some Mercon 5. So the whole thing's been drained. It stinks. In fact, you can see the fluid here. And anyways, just after some reading and some other viewer comments, I did go ahead and put Mercon 5 in the T5. So it's got fresh training fluid all the way through it. I can show you guys real quick here, a real quick clip here on me filling it up, but that would be boring. And let's see here, back to the list though, mainly the exhaust. That's the big thing. The exhaust has been crossed off the list. The old exhaust is laying on the floor. It has been cut out and the new exhaust is in. Now I don't have everything for the exhaust, but I do have the BBK H-pipe. So you see it's up there, looks pretty, and it stops right there at the end of the H-pipe. So I don't have the section from the H-pipe back yet. We're going to have to get something. I do have mufflers to put in here temporarily because it is going to be extremely loud, but I want to run everything back, new mufflers and everything, and exhaust tips back. But it's in, as you can see. It's bolted in. It is like probably 75% tightened. It's not all the way tight, so that's on my list. The O2 sensors are now dangling, but they're not yet plugged in, so that's still on the list and not yet crossed off. But transmission has been changed and feels pretty good, shifts pretty good, and the clutch now feels pretty good. I adjusted the clutch cable. I do have an aluminum quadrant. I don't think I mentioned that to you guys before. Whenever you do change out these clutches to high pressure clutch, and typically you want to change out to an aluminum quadrant with an adjustable firewall adjuster here. So this has been adjusted quite a bit. I don't know if there's a difference between the clutch and the clutch cable. Whatever the case is, the clutch cable was extremely loose with a new clutch. It's kind of the opposite of what I expected, but anyways, it's been adjusted. My clutch pedal feels really good. So, enough talking, let's get to the alternator upgrade. Okay, of course the first thing you're going to need is the 130 amp alternator. This is a brand new unit from Summit Racing. And this guy, I believe I spec'd from a 94 Mustang. Ford made 3G alternators from a ton of years of vehicles. And they put in a ton of different models of vehicles as well. So the 3G alternator, here's the first thing you of course are going to need. Again, this is from a 94 SN95 style Mustang. It is 130 amp and it cranks out a ton more voltage than the puny 65 amp or 75 amp unit does from the factory on the 86 Mustang. Most importantly, if you're using under-drive pulleys, which I am, this guy is going to be able to crank out much more voltage at low RPMs than stock 86 will. Secondly, we're going to need the cable. This is a much larger cable, charging cable that we're going to use for the 130 amp alternator. You need the bigger cable to handle the bigger amps. So we got the same brand cable that I use in my wire relocation kit. I thought this was good cable. It's a pretty good quality. It's actually really good quality for the price. I think I paid $19 for this from Amazon. So that is nice heavy gauge cable. This will be plenty to handle the amps of the 130 amp alternator here. Okay, third, we're going to need the 150 amp fuse. This may be a little bit too much for me, but nonetheless, I want to make sure that if the vehicle ever produced more than 130 amps from the wire, that it blew the fuse. But you can't use a fuse by itself, so you're going to have the bus fuse holder. So I got all this here, both these at Summit Racing. Actually, all three of this at Summit Racing, or Amazon, excuse me. This is at Summit, and I got these and this too at Amazon. And one of the last things you're going to need is a harness. This is not 100% necessary. I decided to buy one of these because it makes the wiring a little bit easier, and it is a new piece to make sure we get a new connection on everything. This I actually found from AutoZone, and it is a Duralast part, believe it or not, and it took me a while, but the gentleman behind the counter was able to find this. And if you guys want to go to AutoZone, that's the part number. It's a 23A14, and they will have this in stock, hopefully locally. If not, they can get it for you probably pretty quickly. But this is a 3G pigtail. And this is all you need. The only other thing you might need is a bolt for this section here. The 3G alternators are not threaded like the 2Gs are, and has a bolt that goes straight through. We're going to improvise and use what I've got here in the shop. So one thing I want to talk about before we get started, and one thing I've noticed is on a lot of videos and a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of different online stuff that I've seen, articles and whatnot, there's not a lot of detail going to the wiring. So one thing I want to make sure before we actually do this is I explain fully the wiring and what's involved in doing the conversion of 2G and 3G. It's actually very simple, and most likely the reason why you don't see a lot of stuff on it is because it is that simple. Okay, you've got two plugs here on your 2G alternator. Now, let's talk about the bottom plug. The bottom plug first. This is the most noticeable one. That's the difference between your 3G alternator. This guy here has two main cables. I've already loosened these up. Two cables that actually feed your battery with amperage. So the output power from your alternator goes down these two wires. And to be honest, guys, don't be fooled by these two wires. This is going into one single wire here, if you can't tell. And this is what's so inadequate about these cars. This single wire right here is in charge of feeding your entire electrical system with amperage. Now when you start adding stuff, you could easily tell why this is inadequate and why this could be easily overpowered and melt and possibly burn the car down. So that is why we have got a larger 4-gauge cable. So we're going to put this in place as well as the 4-gauge cable. So this big plug wire here is simply the output to your alternator, and this is going to be replaced by the post terminal on the back of your 3G alternator. So this is now your output, not that block. What we're going to be doing is cutting this and feeding it onto this post, but that's not going to solve the problem. We're going to add the 4G cable here, and it's going to go all the way to the positive terminal on your starter solenoid. And since electricity takes the path of least resistance, your amperage is going to ultimately go through that larger 4-gauge cable straight to the 1-gauge cable going to the battery. And this will be more than enough cable size to, I guess, allow all the current to go through without overheating anything. The second cable is right up top here, and if you guys look at this, you'll notice it is a three terminal plug, and this can actually directly plug right into your new 3G alternator without any modification. However, the new plug that I've purchased here has 3 wires going to it, whereas this one only has 2, and even these are directly swappable. You notice that your yellow wire is on the far right side on both the plugs, but on this plug you've got a white wire going to the center plug, and on mine you've got a green wire. Now, I don't do enough of these cars that I could tell you if you can use this plug. You probably could, and I'm sure you could probably tie in the white wire off of either you know, one of the power cables or the yellow or green one. I don't know, and I'm not going to tell you guys which way to go with that because I don't know. That is why I recommend going out and buying one of these. This is less than $10 at AutoZone, and it is the correct plug for a 3G alternator. I got this because it's foolproof. You simply plug this into the back of the alternator. Your green wire will tap into the green and red wire. It's like kind of a light green here. And your yellow wire is going to tap into your yellow wire here. This white wire is your stator plug, and this is where it goes into the third connection onto the 3G alternator, which this guy doesn't have. That plug that I'm talking about is right here in the center. So it's really that simple, guys. This is going to plug into here. The green is going to tap into your green harness. Yellow is going to go into yellow. And the white one's simply going to loop and go directly into here. Now, if you're a super hardcore enthusiast, I guess, you can go out and get the correct plug for this. I think I've got one. I'm going to look for it. If not, just get yourself a small spade connector, solder it onto here, and then that'll plug into the white wire. And that is it. That really explains all the wiring involved with this. So let's go ahead and get this removed. I know that putting this in place of here, the housing is slightly larger, so there's going to be some modifications to the brackets, but should be pretty easy. So let's get to it, man. Let's go ahead and take this guy off. Okay, I got myself a 916. We're going to remove the top bolt first. And while I remove this, one thing to note, guys, the 3G alternator, this is actually not threaded on your alternator. We're going to have to find a straight through bolt that goes through it. This kind of sandwiches all together. I think I've got plenty of bolts. If not, a lot of the conversion kits you buy from LMR, American Muscle, or eBay even, will come with the bolts you need for this. Now, obviously, I don't want to have to state the too obvious, but if you do have your belt on, and if you have your upper cooling hose, go ahead and remove that. It's going to be directly into the way. Go ahead and just move it over to the side. Take your serpentine belt off and remove your air intake, and you got plenty of room to work. 916 on the bottom. This is already nice and loose. Yours probably won't be. I'm sure it's super tight. Socket would be more beneficial here, but that's it. Goodbye 2G. Okay, now this is out of the place, I've heard that you have to tap this out just a little bit to make room. We're about to find out, and I've also heard that this guy right here is going to cause interference and be in the way of the 3G. But let's just find out ourselves. Okay, so the bottom is just fine. You can see that I didn't have to change this washer at all. Go ahead and just kind of screw this in loosely, and you will notice that this is in fact hitting where they say it hits. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this here. I know I'm directly above my light source, but you can see where it's hitting right here on the bracket. I'm simply going to take a pencil and mark all the way back where it's hitting. Okay, I'm going to remove the alternator and grind it. Okay, so if you guys can't see this, what we need to remove is a section here all the way through there. So okay, I've resorted to a larger wheel. Got quite a bit of metal, and I think we're going to be good now, guys. Yep. Perfect. One thing interesting I wanted to show you guys is that the pulley size, I know it's kind of hard to see from this angle, but the pulley size on the 3G is the same diameter as the underdrop pulley on my 2G. So that's good. I'm going to use this pulley because it actually looks to me to be a little bit better quality. This one is blue, it matches, yes I know, and it's probably lighter weight. This is most likely steel, a little bit heavier. This is aluminum, but the same size, and we're going to use this one for now. Okay, so I got this guy bolted on. We're not going to bolt the top one on yet. Allow me to get to the connector a little bit easier. And we're just going to go ahead and take these connectors and chop them off. Okay, I pulled the sheathing back on both these wires. You can see here where these two wires are joined. You can see this material is, even on mine, pretty nasty and toasty. So this is where these two wires I told you about actually do join into one. Why there's two here going down to this makes no sense to me. And it's not even soldered. It was essentially some sort of a glue, but there's that. We're going to get rid of this. And we're going to get rid of this. Use as much wire as I can here. Okay. Left are the essentials we need to wire this guy up. The question is where I want to wire it, where I want to run this, and if I want to go ahead and run through here or try to route it somewhere else, because now's the time to do that. Hey, welcome to the next day. We're continuing on with this alternator swap. It's going to be pretty easy from here on out. The purpose of this is to get it kind of hidden and not seen here, but to be honest, the air intake is going to go right here in front of it anyways. You're not going to see it, and this will let me kind of wrap it up and run it straight to the connector, and then when I get the turbo I can relocate it, because the turbo is going to go right here. There's going to be a lot of piping here, and this is probably going to be in the way of the turbo anyways, and you wouldn't want it going here or up front here. So the only other alternative I would have would be to run it back up in the fender well and then through this hole all the way to back here and then up this way. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just kind of debating right now on where to extend it. So this is optional for you guys. Obviously you don't have to go this far. You can just start from where I'm at now and skip to the next section of wiring this thing up. But in the meantime, I'm probably going to extend my wires or leave it here. Yeah. So this is what I've done with the wires. I've got the green wire and yellow wire extended and wrapped in electrical tape so it kind of hides it. It's going down there, and it's right now it's just going up into the plug. Yellow and green, simply going like that. And I've got a soldered and heat shrunk spade terminal here. And it is a nice tight fit, I assure you. How to use pliers on it. Okay, so I shortened this quite a bit too, and put the spade connector on, and that pretty much is all there is to it, buddy. For the alternator regular wiring here, I may want to run it behind this, you know, I'll probably move it, but this is where it is going to go for now. Yeah, and I'm gonna move it and tie it up and get it out of the way here in a second. The power wire decided to go ahead and cut and cap off, simply because we're going to be running the 4-gauge cable, and I didn't see really a need to extend this and putting it to the to your post here. So I'm not going to. I don't think it's needed. It's basically just going to the power wire, charging it. So we're just going to whoop, discard that guy. Now we got to run our nice big 4-gauge cable right there. So that is going to be ran from the alternator up to the front, back behind, all this stuff through that hole, back behind the fender well, coming out here and attaching right here to the post that goes straight to the back of the battery. Okay, so we don't want to forget the fuse. This is a bus fuse, and it holds a mega fuse. I'm going to put a 150 amp fuse in it, which is probably a little bit too big. I probably want to get a smaller one, maybe like 115 or something like that, because it is 130 amp, but I want to make sure it blows before the thing really cranks out too much. So we got to find a spot to put this. I think where I've decided to put it, hopefully you can see this here, is down here on the frame rail right there. So that'll put it low. That'll allow the cable to run along the side here up to the alternator, and then up to the core support, and then we'll run the cable back through here underneath there, and then to the starter solenoid. So what I'm going to do first is mount this to where the side where I want it, and then we'll measure how long we need the cable to go from this terminal to the alternator, and we'll make the cable to size and fit. Something really good for this kind of job are the self-drilling auto perforantes, which means self-drilling in Spanish. Self-drilling screws here, they have a rubber seal on it. They have a bit on the end of it, so when you spin them on the drill, they will actually drill through the metal and tighten it. And these things work really good. I use these for all my P-clamps for the wires. Okay, so scratch that last video. I moved the mega fuse down here on the bottom. I actually moved the plate here. This is where your charcoal canister hangs on to. I went ahead and took that off. It's right there on the ground, and ended up hanging that guy right there. So what I'm going to do is run the cable underneath it, and kind of underneath a sway bar mount, and then straight up here. So it's going to just loop from the back straight down. So what we're going to do is now just make that cable from there to the first terminal of the fuse. So I'm going to take my cable here. This stuff is super flexible and squishy. So this is a pretty good cable. So what I'm going to do is just basically figure out the length I need, cut it, and put the terminal ends on it, and that'll be one part of the power cable. Okay, now I've shown this in a previous video. I'm going to show you how I make my connectors. I do solder and heat shrink, and we've stripped back just enough of this sheathing to fit directly into the stud here on the terminal stud. And yeah, we're going to use a torch. Get some solder out here. My torch is getting low. Get it good and hot. Okay, we got plenty of solder in there. Should still be nice and hot. As soon as that cools off, that is going to be a rock solid connection. Then we're going to take a little piece of heat shrink here that fits it. Let's see, this looks like it's going to be too small. Yeah. Let's get a bigger one. By the way, I bought this pack of heat shrink at a electronics store. There we go. So I don't need too much. I'm going to just kind of cut this in half. This is double wall. It's real thick. It's actually pretty hard to cut. Okay. Slide that down over the terminal. There you go. And that, gentlemen, is a solid connection. I'm going to continue to do this throughout the series, and all the cables will be made this way. Okay, now I think I'm going to have to trim the plastics on the back of this here. So my cable is made, pretty much ready to go. I'm going to see if this will fit. There's a little plastic, I guess, retainer around the stud here that I think is going to be too small to go around this guy, but let's see. Yeah. And I've had this problem before on other vehicles doing this conversion. Let me show you what I'm talking about. You can see that there is a little plastic, I guess, I don't know what to call this thing, a retainer, kind of just shows everybody, hey, that's a positive wire. I don't know if this clicks out or not. Let's see if it does. So ideally, if this can just come out, that would be nice. If not, we'll have to just carefully trim one side of this. You know, going back to this connector here, it's going to be basically all the way in like this. And I'm looking at this connector, and this is such a big connector. It's probably way overkill. Ideally, I want to use something like this to go around it, but you know, I need something that's going to handle this larger 4-gauge cable. So the terminal is going to definitely do the job. However, it is awfully close to the housing of this, and the reason why this thing is here is to keep it away from the housing, because the housing is grounded. So what I'm going to do is actually stand it off the stud a little bit and try to just kind of bend this out. And I tell you, that's easier said than done. This thing is pretty solid for sure. But what I want to do is just stand it out a little bit so it's away from the housing, and it has a solid connection back here and there. So I'm going to see if I can't find another nut to double up on this, like this one here, before we go any further. Okay guys, I've got some washers here. I'm just going to kind of stack this on. That gives me a nice flat surface, also raises it out away from the housing. This will allow me to get the cable angled a little bit further down as well. I think that's going to work really good. Tighten it down. Okay, put that in place. Position this where we want it, and it should be a 10 mil back here, guys. It is. Okay. So that definitely gives me a little bit more clearance from hitting the housing, and yeah, we should be good. And it's nice and solid connection. Let's go underneath the car. Let's get our fuse out here. We need this fuse now. Okay, down here in the dark with our bus fuse. Let's go ahead and loosen this up. Okay, pretty easy here. I want to stick the bus fuse on. Hold that there for a second. So we'll just screw one side on just to kind of hold it. There we go. And that thing fits nice and flush. It's got kind of a rubber grommet around here that holds this thing flush. These are real cheap, but they're not cheaply made, you know. They're pretty good. Okay, I'm going to keep this loose for now until we get everything connected how we want. So that is kind of the cable. We're going to wrap it up and put a nice clamp on it here against the frame. So that goes, as you can see, goes straight up to the alternator. And the other side, we're just simply going to feed up and up into the behind the radiator shroud. Alright, so we'll take this 25-foot roll, Give ourselves plenty. So I want to make sure this is going to go from there, behind here. It's going to go all the way back through the radiator, underneath the cover, and let's give ourselves another extra about foot or so. Alright, plenty left over. This stuff's always good to use for something. So, okay, so now all I need to do is make the connectors on both sides here and run it the correct way all the way to the starter. Okay, so the cable's made. I got both ends terminated. This is probably way too big of terminals, but it's going to work just fine. And I want to show you guys that not all heat shrink is created equal. The stuff I've got here was actually pretty expensive. I didn't know that when I bought it until I checked out, but I noticed that this stuff is double layer, and when it shrinks really hard, and it's also got a very sticky layer of glue on the inside, so when it shrinks it also glues everything together, so it even makes your connection even stronger with the solder as well. So yeah, it should be good to go. All we're going to do now is just route it through. Okay, so it has been ran up through here. Behind the radiator. We're going to tie this down through this guy here. It's actually going to the hole in the side. That'll go behind the radiator cap like that. Then it's running behind the fender, and then it's going up into this hole here where everything else is coming out to the starter solenoid. Now this is going to go, I want to talk real quick just about where you put this. I've seen videos where guys are putting this on the back side of the terminal, and luckily they're keeping the the other connection, that's the stock connection to the back of the output, or the stock, I guess, output connection from the alternator, so it's actually getting some charge. Otherwise, without that connection, if they would have cut it and not use it like I did, I don't think the battery would have charged at all. This is just a solenoid, and this is just a relay. So basically, whenever you turn the key on, you got all your power coming here. When power is received on this top post, it switches power temporarily to this post, which sends power down to your starter, starts the engine. So naturally, if you keep this here, it's not going to do anything unless you're starting your engine as far as charging your car goes. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I don't know. Logic to me seems that that's not a good spot for it. So no big deal. We're going to put it here though. This is where I've always put it on all my other cars. This is going to go straight to my battery in the back. And I'll tighten that down. Just like that. So everything else needs to be buttoned down. We've got the wire going through. So the wiring is done. One thing I do need to do on the bottom here is go ahead and button up this other connector. Okay. This has a nice rubber holder. Okay, keeps everything protected from the rain, from the elements. So that's connected. Oh yeah, good times. Cool. One last thing we want to do is bolt down the alternator. I luckily had this grade 8 bolt that I bought for, I guess, the chains, everything I used to pull the engine. So this turned out to be absolutely perfect. We got some grade 8 hardware. I want to stick it through this way. With 916. Hey guys, that really is it. There's not a whole lot more to it. I know there's some cleanup I gotta do. I'm gonna have to put some of this junk up, and I do have to tie in this stuff. Now, I am gonna use P-clamps and tie these cables down against the frame so they don't move. I don't think I need to show you that. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's cleanup. But as far as running and installing, this thing's ready to go. Fortunately, I can't start it and prove it to you guys. Trust me, this thing's going to make voltage. If something comes up whenever I do end up starting the motor and it's not making voltage, I promise you I will come back and I will tell you that I made a huge mistake. I will admit to my mistakes, but there's no mistakes here. I promise this is going to work. And it looks good. So guys, that's it. If you have any questions or comments, please post it below. And we will see you guys next time. Hope you enjoy the video and make sure to follow me on Instagram.